Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. I want to jump right in today because my guest, I saw her story actually in an article online, and I was like, this is a crazy story, but it affects so many of us, or it could affect so many of us. And that's why I wanted to bring her on today so that we could chat about it. I'm so grateful that she's here. Nikki Gosser, she is a senior fellow at the Crime Prevention Research Center and a Tennessee delegate of Women for Gun Rights. And she actually became a victims' rights advocate after her own husband was brutally murdered in front of her by her stalker. And Nikki, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Tudor, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I have so many questions about this. And I appreciate that you're willing to go through it. Did you always know that this guy was stalking you that night or that day? Did you know that he was there to do this?
No. As with many victims of stalking, sometimes it takes a while to figure it out, okay, this person is more than just odd or behaving strangely or paying a little bit too much attention to me. It can take a while, and I did not realize I was being stalked until that very night. It's a long story, but basically that night I realized, okay, this has gone too far. This man is stalking me, and I asked management to please remove him from the restaurant where Ben and I were running our mobile karaoke show. And when management asked him to leave, he pulled out a .45 and shot my husband 7 times in front of myself and everyone in the middle of that busy restaurant. It was a gun-free zone. At that time in Tennessee, you were not allowed to carry a permitted legal firearm in any restaurant if they served any alcohol. So I obeyed that law and left my legal permitted firearm locked inside of my vehicle. Of course, my stalker did not. He brought a gun in illegally, did not have a handgun carry permit, and proceeded to murder my husband. I'll probably wonder for the rest of my life if I could have prevented that. Of course, I'll never know because I was denied a chance. I was stalked and defenseless.
And that's the title of your book. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing this because I think so many women have this fear of someone stalking them and not knowing, but the numbers are kind of remarkable how many women actually do end up having someone stalk them, and then you are in a situation where you are your only defense because there's no one else that can constantly be around you protecting you. I think it's interesting that you talk about the fact that you were in a gun-free zone, because I think that we have this constant conflict in our society of how do you actually protect people from a bad guy with a gun? Because it's not protecting you from the gun itself. You're protecting the person from this person who has a bad intention. And it's very hard to know ahead of time who has a bad intention. Let's just be honest. We all say, oh, we could have figured this out. We could have figured that out. If we had just had this law in place, this wouldn't have happened. Well, at the end of the day, this guy broke all the laws to get to you. And the law was there to protect you. The law of having a gun-free zone in restaurants was there to protect you. And honestly, at the end of the day, you ended up without any protection whatsoever. So what have you done since? Because I think a lot of parents will say, well, I want a gun-free zone at my church. I want a gun-free zone at my school. I want a gun-free zone on all these places. And then they find out that the only person with the weapon is the bad guy.
Right. Unfortunately, I think so many people who go through horrific things like I've been through, many of them become very anti-gun, and they want more and more gun-free zones. It makes them feel like it's more safe, and I feel it's actually the opposite. That is just a welcome sign to someone with ill intent, someone who's evil, where they can have free reign. There is no good person there to be able to truly stop them. And just like you said, the bad guy will be the only one with a gun, and everyone else will be sitting ducks. And I've tried to educate people for the past 15 years about this. You really have to think about this differently. You have to almost think like a bad guy, really.
Right.
in order to prepare yourself.
And I think the interesting thing about your story is, as women, we always are concerned that someone is going to come and hurt us. The fact that this man came in and shot your husband right in front of you, and you lost your husband that day, I just can't imagine what that's like to Monday morning quarterback that. Like, should I have known the signs? Should I have seen the signs? And it's so hard because you can't see the signs. But this guy is not letting up. He continues to try to find you, and he's in prison right now, but he's sending you letters. Isn't that right?
Yes, he has sent many twisted love letters for years from prison. And he doesn't know where I live. I hope he doesn't know where I live. He would send the letters to my former attorney that I used in my wrongful death suit against him. So all of that paperwork, of course, was sent to him in the prison, and it had my attorney's address on it. And so he used that address to send these letters year after year after year. So the obsession has continued, and it's extremely disturbing because he's getting out. People think that when someone does something this horrific, and it was obvious to me that it was premeditated, but liberal judge, bench trial, judge dropped it down to the lesser offense of second degree. So now he's getting out. His release date is 2030, and he's being let out early for good behavior because they're given good behavior credits. It's really disturbing.
What year was it that he was put in prison?
2009, and he's going to be released in 2030 right now. He did receive 1 extra year of prison time for the federal stalking charge, but it's a joke, really. You know, I mean, sure, it's 1 extra year, but he's still getting out, and it's terrifying.
It's just an interesting argument because we've had so many people on here. We have people on from both sides, people that are, pro Second Amendment, people who want some of those Second Amendment rights taken away and have that whittled down. And I can see both perspectives. It's a challenging situation because you have people who, depending on their own personal experience, they don't fall in the black and white. They fall in that gray area of a situation that we didn't know how to contain. And I consider you in that situation where it's like, okay, it seems like a really good idea to just ban guns in this area, but then the bad guy is the only one with the gun. And I mean, we've had this discussion from many perspectives. When it is kids with a gun, when it is a school situation, yours is now a different situation. But we did have a gentleman on here who does trainings for women on weapons training. So he does shootings, or he does training, gun training. I have attended it. I don't use a gun, so I can't even talk that clearly about it. But his reasoning was because he said he remembers investigating a crime and finding a woman in a ditch, and her body was, she had been murdered. Her body was laying there, and he said, it will never leave my mind that she had no way of defending herself. So unless he can train women to defend themselves with a weapon, then what equalizer do they have up against a man who is coming to them and wanting to harm them in some way? Now, again, your situation was different where he wasn't even coming for you, but you are someone who was trained with a gun, and you weren't allowed to have it in that situation. So how are these gun-free zones actually helping anyone?
Exactly. And I just want to point out that when the police searched his vehicle at the crime scene that night, they found 2 more guns, ammunition, a baseball bat, binoculars, gloves, rope, and a knife.
Do you know what his intent was of that night? Was his intent to go and kill your husband? Was his intent to kidnap you?
The police believe that his intent was to try and kidnap me, and do away with my husband. I'll never really know. He was diagnosed with delusional disorder and erotomania, and he's going to be out, and that is terrifying. They don't keep dangerous people locked up. At least when he's done with his prison time, put him in an institution.
Right. I think that's You know, there are so many people out there who say, well, there's people will get better in prison, there's redemption. But if you clearly show signs that you are not redeemed, that you are continuing to go after someone, and isn't it illegal to continue to harass and stalk someone? Wouldn't it be considered continued stalking if he is sending you these letters? And based on what you've said, the letters are pretty disgusting.
Yes, it is. And he was actually convicted of federal stalking, but you know, the penalties are not severe enough, and he's still going to be released. So basically what I'm going to have to do is go and sign up for the address confidentiality program that's offered through the Tennessee Secretary of State's office, and basically have to try to hide. And so many times these victims of stalking, that's what they have to do. And it's very disturbing to me that I would have to completely change and rearrange my life and have to hide when I haven't done anything wrong. He is the person that has done wrong.
Right, the victim continues to be a victim of these people. They continue to go after you. So, I mean, you're from Tennessee. We saw the school shooting in Tennessee recently of the trans shooter that had the manifesto. We don't know what was in that, but we know, I mean, we're pretty certain that this was premeditated, that this was planned, that there was in this person's mind some reason for them to go after this school. I mean, not so different from the situation of obsessing, whether it was obsessing over someone you wanted to, whatever he was going to do with you, I guess in his mind, some sort of sick, twisted love that he had for you, but still an obsession. I would say in the case of the school shooting, it was also somewhat of an obsession. And you would argue that the teachers also deserve to be able to protect themselves. You've been in support of arming teachers in the past, have you not?
Yes, absolutely.
And Governor Lee in Tennessee, he recently signed a law that said that teachers could be allowed to carry weapons in the classroom.
Yes, and it's totally voluntary. No one is forcing teachers to carry a gun. And, you know, they have to go through 40 hours of firearms training with law enforcement. They have to go through a psychological evaluation. They have to have their advanced handgun carry permit. And they have to be approved by the principal and local law enforcement before they are able to do that. So it's not just, hey, I'm a teacher, so I want to carry. No, you have to go through an entire process. You have to be vetted, and I absolutely support that because, look, when someone comes into a school and their mind is on a high body bag count, which is what happens. That's what these evil people want. They want to be remembered. They want to be in the media. They want the news to cover it, and they know if they get a higher body bag count, then they will be all over the news and they will be famous. Unfortunately, that's what the media does. They make them famous. And these evil people know it. I mean, look, just because they're evil doesn't mean they're stupid. And they also realize that what better place to get a higher body bag count than a gun-free zone. That's why they continue to choose schools and other gun-free zones. 94% of mass public shootings occur in gun-free zones. But you never hear about it because the media never wants to talk about it.
But with that statistic out there, why aren't there more people on the other side saying, okay, tried this, it didn't work? Because the reality is that everybody thinks that they have the solution, but so far there has not been a solution yet to figuring out when someone is going to premeditate a crime. I mean, we don't have the what was it, the show where they could find out whether or not somebody was going to commit a crime beforehand. We can't actually do that. This is ridiculous. The idea that they think, well, if we take away anybody's ability to protect themselves in a certain area, then we are going to end up keeping everybody safe. Then how can they not just, I said many times when I was on the campaign trail, these are sitting duck zones. In the state of Michigan, for example, the state police came out with a long report on how to protect our kids. And one of the ways to protect our kids was to have security on campus that could take down a shooter. And yet that has not been implemented. In fact, the governor has done nothing with that report because I believe that she is too afraid to come out and say, well, the state police have said that the best way to protect kids is to have somebody on campus that could take that shooter out, because they are unable to say that there are times when someone with a weapon has to take down someone else with a weapon. And the reality of their argument of we're going to get rid of all guns, we're just going to take all guns off the street, it's impossible. That's never going to happen. I mean, it's just a lie that they sell to get elected. It has nothing to do with reality. And I would argue that the people who are creating this falsehood that you can eventually take all guns off the street and everybody's just going to live in la la land, those are the ones who are putting kids in danger every single day because they refuse to come up with a real solution to the problem.
I agree. Keeping good law-abiding people from being able to carry for their own self-defense and for the defense of their loved ones does nothing to stop bad, evil people with guns.
Right. You've been speaking out on this for the last 15 years. What have you heard from the other side? When you say, hey, we need to be able to have women protect themselves in public, women need to be able to carry and protect themselves in public places, what's the other side saying to you?
Oh, you've always got the people, just like you said, that are like, well, if there were no guns, then we wouldn't have these problems. Look, in other countries where they have banned guns, crime rates have gone up. Evil people find a way. They just do. They will knife you to death. They will choke you to death. They will beat you to death. They will run you over with a car. They will create a bomb. Evil people, that they will find a way. And the gun, as far as protecting women, that is a huge equalizer for a female. I mean, let's face it, physically, we are just not as strong as your average male. We just aren't. And your job is to keep that man who wants to harm you away from you. You don't ever want him to get up on you. And that's the point of carrying the gun, to keep him away from you and stop the threat if need be legally.
Well, let's talk about your experience a little bit, because you said you didn't know until afterward that he was actually stalking you. Is there something now that you look back that you've learned that there are signs you should be watching for? Because I think that I'm a mom of 4 girls. I think that people listening out there, they have daughters or they're, women themselves that are always wondering, is there something I should be concerned about? What were the signs? How do you know if you have this happening? Because you said you weren't aware until the devastating murder of your husband.
Actually, I was aware right before.
Okay.
Yeah, I was aware that night, and I asked management to remove him. And when they proceeded to ask him to leave is when he carried out the crime. I would tell females to really pay attention to what is being said to them and how much attention is being paid to them. If you follow your gut, if you feel like something is not quite right here, I would listen to your gut. I remember feeling that, like, there's something not quite right with this guy, and he's showing me a little bit too much attention. Really listen to that and stay on guard. Obviously, don't go walking by yourself somewhere if that person is around, or, if you are concerned, make sure to have a friend with you. Pay attention to your surroundings. Situational awareness is incredibly important. Even if you have a gun and carry a gun for your own self-defense, you've really got to pay attention to what is going on around you.
You said these guys like to be famous. You don't say the name of the person who did this to you because you don't believe that there should be any attention on these folks. When you see these mass shootings at colleges or high schools, and you see that they keep flashing the picture up, what would be your recommendation in those cases?
I understand that, the public obviously wants to know who did this horrible thing. And I think there's a fine balance between informing the public and just going on and on and on and plastering the person's picture everywhere and making them famous. That's what they want. Stop giving them what they want. Take away the incentive from them. I think that's part of the problem. There are some really sick, evil, or mentally ill people out there, and sometimes it's all of the above, and they want the attention, and you can't give that to them. I think it's a real problem that no one seems to want to talk about in the media, because, let's face it, it's the media. They want...
Right, exactly.
They want, to have higher viewership. But I think it's a real problem in our country where we're incentivizing these people.
Well, we asked for the manifesto from the Nashville school shooter. Didn't get that, but you get all of the information about her name, her background, everything that happened in her life. And we're supposed to feel bad for the shooter, but we don't know anything about what motivated them to do this. I think that parents across the country for a long time have said, hey, wait a minute, I'm a little bit worried that my child is stuck in this sitting duck zone. And that's where I would call on politicians who can change these laws to come out and speak. And I think it's important for us as parents to push them and say, hey, wait a minute, now this isn't working. What was the statistic you put out there that was the percentage of mass shootings in a gun-free zone?
94%.
94% of mass shootings occur in a gun-free zone. To me, that is shocking that we don't have more people standing up and saying enough is enough. We need to, if this is where they're happening, get rid of that. Make sure they don't know who's going to stop them. And I don't even think that it should be about clearly marked people who are standing at the door with a gun saying, because everybody says, I don't want my kid going into a war zone. I don't want my kid walking past someone with a gun. They don't have to. The fact that the shooter doesn't know that who's going to stop them at the door, because right now, you are right. Every one of those people goes, hey, I can go into this school. No one's going to stop me. It's going to take this long for the police to get there. That's the only stop for me, is when the police drive this many minutes to get to the school. So I am free to do whatever I want in that school until those cops get there, because no one's going to stop me. So what if we just change that? What if we got rid of these gun-free zones? Hey, maybe we just see how that goes for a few years and see how these people don't feel comfortable anymore. They don't say, oh gosh, I have nobody coming after me. Maybe, just maybe, if they don't know who's at the door with a gun to take them out, they won't be coming in there. But I also believe that this goes much deeper than whether or not people are going to stop someone with a gun. I'd like to know exactly what kind of medications these people were on, what their life has been. Why aren't we doing comparisons of all of these shooters? Because a lot of them have similar stories, and I just think that there's a lot more information there that we are not getting as the public, and we should be fighting harder, because these are our kids, these are our loved ones, these are our spouses, and we need to know what is happening with these people. What is the full background story, so we can prepare to protect our loved ones?
I agree. And I believe in the element of surprise. Teachers who conceal carry, it's like you said, the bad guy won't know who is carrying and who is not. I believe the element of surprise is extremely important in helping defend the lives of others, especially.
So why have these gun-free zones? Why do these Democrat politicians push so hard for gun-free zones if they have these statistics? Because there is no question in my mind that they have these statistics. They are well aware that the majority of mass shootings happen where no one can stop them. Let's just be honest about this. It's not a gun-free zone. This is a place where no one is coming to stop you. If you walk in with a gun, you're the only bad guy there. You're the only person with a weapon. So why are people defending these gun-free zones? Is this some sort of sick and twisted thing? Because every time there's a school shooting, they can come out and say, oh, the bad Republicans who support the Second Amendment are the reason that this is happening, when in reality they know the reason this is happening is because they have set these kids up in a situation where they have no protection.
Unfortunately, we have a real problem in our country with mental health. We don't have the resources, we don't have the facilities to deal with these issues anymore. We don't have the money. Our money is being sent elsewhere when our money, I feel like, needs to stay here and help in our own country with our own crime problems. We don't have the mental health facilities that we once did.
But maybe that, I mean, this sounds crazy, but maybe that's the whole plan. I mean, as I watch all these students that are funded to destroy college graduations, to go out there and start doing their 5 times a day prayers and all of these discussions about killing all the Jews and death to America, I start to wonder if all of that money going other places is actually the plan, because who is funding this? Why is there no investigation into this? And what's going to happen with those protests? Because I feel like as we see this expanding and expanding to our students, this mental health issue, which I believe, I mean, when I see some of these kids that are interviewed on campus, these are mental health issues. These are people that are being pulled into the worst possible scenario because they are vulnerable. What happened? How did they get there? How was this funded? Does this go to Big Pharma? Does this go to Democrats? It's coming through Act Blue, so it must be going to Democrats. And I just see that this is going to be a bigger and bigger problem. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I gotta say, where the money is going makes me think that it leads back a lot to these situations and issues that get Democrats elected to give Democrats more power.
I would agree.
So let's talk about your book, because I want to get to that. It is Stalked and Defenseless. Tell us about the book. Tell us where we can get it. Tell us who you think should be reading it.
Sure. My book is Stalked and Defenseless, and you can find that at Amazon and also Barnes & Noble online. I believe that the person that needs to read this book is any female who is concerned for her safety. And, fathers, brothers, uncles, anyone, husbands, anyone who is concerned about a significant female in their life and is concerned for their safety and wants them to have better situational awareness, I would recommend this book for them.
And does this go through how to protect yourself, like how to get to those trainings, how to self-defense, all of that?
It does speak to some of that, yes. It mostly explains what I went through and hopefully influence others to take their safety very seriously and do what they can to protect themselves and their loved ones.
Yeah, it's such a different world than what we grew up in, or maybe we just hear more about what the dangers are out there. But now that we know, it's so important to educate yourself, make sure that you are safe, but also as we're raising girls, to make sure that those girls understand that there really are true dangers out there. There really are bad people out there, and you do have to be aware of it. I think it's interesting. I think I heard you quoted saying, there were younger waitresses, there were other women there. I don't know why he chose me. And that's something that we don't necessarily, we get so wrapped up in what's happening around us. Oh, well, she talks to all the guys. She's this, she's that. It's not going to happen to me. You were surprised it happened to you, but it could happen to anyone. You were always traveling with your husband, correct?
Correct. My husband was always with me, yes.
So it just goes to show you have to be incredibly aware of your surroundings. Nikki, I am so sorry for your loss. And I just think what you've been able to do with that situation to educate other people, to come out on behalf of our safety and women's safety and the safety of our children, it's been just so amazing to watch.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. And if your audience would like additional information on crime data in the U.S. Elsewhere, you can go to crimeresearch.org.
Okay, wonderful. And make sure you check out the book. It is Stalked and Defenseless on Amazon by Nikki Gosser. Thank you so much for being on here today, Nikki.
Thank you, Tudor. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us on the Tudor Dixon Podcast for this episode and others. Go to TudorDixonPodcast.com. You can subscribe right there or head over to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Have a blessed day.